before the boil is achieved, but while the liquid is fairly hot. Look at that sweetness. It looks almost like it's like cotton candy. Sweet. If we add this small amount of yeast to the beer, it's so small that other organisms that fall into the tank will have a chance of competing with the yeast. So what we're doing is we're going to be culturing up the population of the yeast and change this amount of yeast into an amount like this big by growing it in these bottles overnight. By the time that the main brew is ready for yeast, we'll be adding these bottles to that tank, and the population of yeast will be far greater than this, probably 10 times this amount. I see a rolling boil starting. You can see the foamy layer here on the top, and I'm just sort of stirring back into the beer.
Here, I add the diammonium phosphate to the boiling liquid, which dissolves it completely. Here, I put the sterile pot into a cold water bath in the sink. This will cool the liquid quickly in preparation for pouring it into the glass bottles.
I want to warm up these bottles so that there's no chance that they'll crack, because that water might be still pretty warm. Good. Okay, now they're all stopped. I like this bottle a lot better than when it had milk in it.
I give the yeast culture a good shake to wake it up and homogenize the chunks throughout the liquid so that I can divide it evenly between the culture bottles.
Now it's simple as cracking this and cracking those things. This. That's all there is to it. What's going to happen now is in the next few hours, the yeast is going to activate in all of these. But I don't want it to activate for these two, so I'm going to put them in the fridge. Stick them in the back there. Now the temperature of the fridge is cold enough that it should deactivate the ale yeast. The ale yeast will remain dormant there until I'm ready to use it. This one will be used for the brew tomorrow. So I'm going to put this up on the fridge where it's nice and warm all the time, fairly consistent, and this should come to life in the next few hours and start effervescing like a beer you just opened. And the yeast sediment layer will form at the bottom and fill up maybe that much by the time we're ready to start the brew, I would guess. But the population is definitely going up from here on out.
Copper filter that I assemble from small parts and install into the mash tun each time I brew. The manifold is held in place by its tight fit in the circular tank. Once the tank is filled with a proper amount of water, I fire up the propane burner and watch the temperature closely. The target temperature is 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Once the target temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit is achieved, I pour the pale malt and unmalted flaked barley into the tank. I turn off the open flame before I do this because the flour dust is highly flammable, especially in dry conditions. It begins to dissolve into the water and after a few minutes will resemble cooked oatmeal. I must stir the dry flour into the liquid, breaking up chunks as I stir so that it dissolves completely. This, of course, is best done with a proper tool. Not just any spoon is appropriate for this. I need a real spoon. A lot of care goes into breaking up all of the chunks of dry flour so that every bit is wetted. This is important for the enzymes to have access to all of the starch, and it is important for achieving the proper pH. For the correct pH balance, you need to have the correct proportion of water to malt, which is 1.35 quarts of water per pound of malt.